This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it is Smackdown time. We have the M1 Apple Silicon MacBook Air here. We'll also talk about the 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 and the latest generation Dell XPS 13 9310. Two 13-inch class Ultrabooks that are thin, light, quite powerful, and starting around $1,000 or so, so not bargain price by any means, kind of on the premium side, but not insanely expensive either. We're going to look at them now. So the Dell XPS line is their premium line of laptops, as you no doubt know by now, again, starting around $1,000-ish, probably for a lower-end configuration than a lot of us want. A lot of you want at least a Core i5 and a 256 gig SSD and all those other things. So that price can go up to the $1,200s and so on. That gets you a full HD Plus display. The Plus is because, like the Mac now, it has a 16 by 10 aspect ratio display, so a little bit added height compared to the usual, well, 16 by 9 aspect ratio laptop display. There is a 4K display option for the Dell that's going to add more money on again. I personally think 4K is a little overkill for a 13-inch class laptop, but I know some of you really would like that. But then the price starts creeping up, and you can get up to $2,000 with a Dell XPS 13 if you want all the bells and whistles like the 11th Gen Core i7, that 4K display, a big SSD, and all that sort of thing. The MacBook Air starts at $999 with the M1 processor, new Apple Silicon processor, and the MacBook Pro 13-inch, also with the M1 processor, starts at $1,299, so similarly priced, in other words. So with the Macs, besides the new Apple Silicon CPU, which we'll talk about, and if you haven't watched my review of those two, please do so. It'll help with this decision. Anyway, with those, you get a in-betweener screen aspect ratio, and it's your only display option. So not quite as many configuration decisions to make with the Mac, but that's the 2560 by 1600. So I think that's kind of best of the both worlds. While full HD might seem a little low res, this is sufficiently high resolution. Everything looks really nice and crispy on it without going all the way to crazy 4K that hits your battery life and requires more aggressive scaling and all that sort of thing. When it comes to RAM and storage options, both of these are available with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM soldered on board for both of these, so that you're not going to get upgradable RAM on either of them. And with the Dell, you can go up to 32 gigs of RAM, which for a 13-inch Ultrabook with a low voltage CPU, I don't know. If you really need 32 gigs of RAM, you probably also need a more powerful machine, but it's there for you in case you're running a whole lot of virtual machines. They both use very fast storage, NVMe class, and with the Mac, that is soldered on board. In fact, it's sort of integrated with the M1 Apple Silicon chip, which is one of the reasons why it's so fast. So you can go with 256 gigs on the Mac all the way up to 2 terabytes. And the Dell gives you a variety of choices as well, and that is an M.2 NVMe SSD, so that one is upgradable. So when we're talking about that whole M1 chip thing, like I said, again, watch my review of that if you haven't already. It's a new ARM-based architecture or RISC-based architecture for Apple, and it's phenomenally fast, in part because the CPU does kind of stack RAM and SSD storage and all that stuff, so instructions move around a lot more quickly. And the performance has been insane while keeping the temperatures low and the battery consumption, relatively speaking, very modest. So for the core functions of your average 13-inch laptop, which I think for most people are light home business use cases, that sort of thing, some photo editing, maybe occasional video editing, all those sorts of tasks that you buy a smaller laptop for, it blows everything out of the water, the Mac. It really does. It pushes up there with a 16-inch MacBook Pro in terms of CPU performance, or a Dell XPS 15. So you're getting the most powerful laptop, obviously, if you buy the Mac. You're getting the one that runs the coolest by a long shot. Just like the older, you know, when the MacBook Airs used to get pretty damn toasty, and even the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the Dell XPS 13 under some load certainly gets quite hot to the touch. The new Macs, they don't do that. Battery life is phenomenal on them. Now with the Dell XPS 13, if you stick with the full HD resolution, you'll get the best battery life possible with the Dell, and it's pretty good, but it's still not as good as the Macs. So with the 4K display on the Dell, yeah, it's really gonna hit about 3 hours of battery life. But you could do 9 hours on the XPS 13, which is nothing to sneeze at, but the Macs can go even longer on the same use cases, sometimes 12, 13 hours with the brightness set identically on them. So basic laptop functionality, Apple wins. But then it's not as simple as that for some people, is it? Some of you need Windows programs. If you do, obviously you need the XPS 13. There's no more boot camp with the Apple M1 Macs. So yeah, Parallels will come eventually and be available. So that's a software-based, basically virtual machine, so you can run both Windows and Mac that way, but it's not available yet. So for those of you who need Windows now, you're still going to have to get the XPS 13. So there's that. When it comes to compatibility, despite the fact that we have a whole new CPU architecture in the Mac, I haven't seen any problems running things like Intel-based Photoshop under Rosetta, Microsoft Office. So there is a beta now for Office that runs on native Apple silicon. No problems. A couple of specialty items, though, probably more of the kinds of things that people who buy bigger laptops would use, like Wacom Cintiqs and some USB-based audio hardware sort of things. It's going to take a while for drivers for those to come out. Obviously, the XPS 13 is based on a very mature, shall we say, if not old architecture, the Intel x86, so you don't have to worry about that sort of thing. When it comes to keyboard and trackpad, well, you know the story. Macs have great trackpads. It may be ginormous, huge, but then Dell is kind of copying that too. Still the edge to the Mac, but the Dell's trackpad is fine. Keyboards are both low travel on these. I would say if you can get to a store to try them out, which is, I know, tough in COVID times, do give them a try. But both very short travel. I might give the edge to the Mac keyboard, but it really is a personal preference thing. And they're both backlit and white and all that good stuff. They both have nice unibody aluminum construction. They look very premium, so I don't think there's a winner there. In terms of portability, whether you're talking about the 13-inch MacBook Pro or the Air versus the XPS 13, they're all very light and very thin. And the Dell's got the most compact design, but we're talking small here. And they come with compact chargers, particularly the MacBook Air has the smallest charger, but none of these is big. They're small, so nothing to talk about or see there. So it sounds like the Mac is kind of mopping the floor with the XPS, unless you need Windows or you love Windows, which is a thing, certainly. But it's not the case, because here's the thing, though. The Mac may have all new CPU architecture inside and all that sort of thing, and wicked performance, and battery life is great, and cool running, but it's still the same casing. Apple didn't change that at all. So if you already didn't like the bigger bezels on the Mac versus the XPS 13, I mean, that's a cosmetic thing, not a functional thing, but people do care about that. Well, that's not changed. If you want to upgrade your SSD, the XPS 13, sure, you can do that. The Mac, no, you cannot do that. They're both a little hobbled on the connectivity front by just having Thunderbolt ports on board, legacy ports goodbye, other than a headphone jack. The Dell does have Thunderbolt 4 versus Thunderbolt 3, but the differences there for most people are pretty small. But one key thing to keep in mind is with the M1 Macs only, they can only support the built-in panel and one external display. You can use DisplayLink, which is a really old USB-based display technology, sort of like hacking in a way, almost technology, to get more monitors going on a Mac. But by design, Apple designs it so you can use one monitor and the built-in display. It can be a 4K or a 5K monitor, and that's fine at 60 Hertz. But with the Dell, you don't have that limitation. So for those of you who do use two external monitors on your desk, well, it's going to be the Dell, or you're going to have to wait for the more powerful Macs from Apple to ship that have more ports on them. For the rest of the stuff, they both have Wi-Fi 6, they both have Bluetooth, you get the idea. Not much to talk about. When it comes to the speakers, Macs tend to have really good speakers, and the MacBook Pro has a little bit better speakers than the MacBook Air. It does sound better than the XPS 13 speakers, so there's that. But you do have a headphone jack and external speakers for those of you who really care about your audio quality. So there you have it, the M1 Apple Silicon MacBook Pro 13-inch and MacBook Air versus the Dell XPS 13 latest generation with Intel 11th Gen CPUs inside. Hopefully now the decision's a little bit easier for you as to which is more important for you. Battery life, cooler running, performance, that sort of thing, versus the ability to hook up more monitors, for example, the ability to run Windows, the sort of things that Dell's good at, the swappable SSD. You get the idea. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos and hit the notification bell so you know about them.